Hello everyone and welcome to your horoscope for the week of November the 27th till December the 3rd, 2023. We have quite an intense sky at play, but of course this is something we're already used to. I do believe that on every single horoscope this year, I started with an intense sky because actually in one way or another, at every single week, there was some kind of intensity at play out there, either collectively speaking or individually speaking. We had a very, very tough year. And especially that there were moments when the intensity was actually caused by blockages, by stagnation, by certain things, inner forces or external forces, like freezing, standing still, no progress, and that was usually specific to the end of the summer and the autumn period. So, we had a very, very tumultuous, multifaceted energy playing out all throughout the year. And we are now getting to December, where this intensity takes a totally different turn. This is where big moves are being prepared. So they're not exactly displaying or playing out yet, but they are in a preparation from a karmic perspective and, of course, from a creational perspective, because all of us are called upon, especially right now, to make certain choices, to make certain inner decisions, to decant our own feelings, how we feel about life, how we feel about people, how we feel about the future, how we feel about basically everything that matters for us. Why? Because when our inner truth, when our knowledge crystallizes, that is going to be the matrix. That is going to be basically the cradle of the future all of us are creating in the present moment. So the reason why I had to say this long introduction is because perhaps this week and the following weeks are going to be the most important highlights of this creational period. Because as I said a couple of horoscopes back, the larger period feels like being born. It feels like being stuck in a very narrow birth canal, where in a way we already said bye-bye to the normality, so being in a womb, symbolically speaking. But the external world, the light outside of the mother's body, so to speak, is still a mystery. We know that it's gonna come, we know that it's there, but we can't even imagine how it's gonna feel like. So this is where we are at the very last phases of that period, when we're almost, excuse my poor symbolism, but we're almost born, but we still experienced, the last struggles in that sense. So, anyway, let's get to the horoscope of this week, because we begin the week with a really powerful full moon taking place in the sign of Gemini. And this will put a strong emphasis on our adaptability, because the sky is concentrated on mutable energy. So, in a way, it's not going to be all that easy, but it's neither going to be all that difficult, because this is the specifics of mutable energy. We can always find a way to adapt. We can always find, let's say, a middle path. We can always find some kind of compromise to make it okay as much as it's possible in the, taking into consideration the specifics of the present, the specifics of the given situation. But at the same time, and I would like to share the screen now for you to see the energies. But at the same time, because the specific of this full moon is a T-square, so the moon and the sun holding square with Saturn from fellow mutable sign Pisces, this Saturn tells us that sometimes we really, really need to think with all our wisdom, with all our philosophy, with all our life experience, Pisces basically, in which way our adaptation could lead to, for example, even greater inconvenience, or we can complicate our lives even more by deciding to just adapt, just to go with the flow, because there will be certain situations which cannot be, adapted. There are going to be certain situations when all we can do is make our choice on how we respond and how we react. And in certain cases, we have to stand our ground. We have to, stick to our truth. We have to stick to our dignity, basically, and defend it. And the reason why I'm saying this is because another specific of this full moon, Gemini full moon, is that the sun is in conjunction, so very, very close to Mars. So it's actually both the sun and Mars together illuminating the moon in Gemini. And Mars is the principle of action, survival, very strongly reaction, getting where you want, etc., etc. And it's also, the planet of conflict, the planet of war, the planet causing confrontations against survival, basically. And it's quite intense in the sign of Sagittarius, a fire sign. And it's not just Mars, but also the sun, who likes being in fire sign. So together they make it very, very combustive. They make it very, very quick. And Sagittarius is, of course, quick by its nature. And that means we might not have enough time to think, to process, to conjure up, let's say, an appropriate reaction. So this may lead to conflict, this may lead to outlashes, this may lead to angry words, this may lead to, even like a mental breakdown, because Gemini is very strong mind energy. Pisces, Saturn in Pisces, is psychological energy. And when these two are in tension, well, either the psyche or the mind or both are going to have a moment of breakdown. So this is why it's so very important, so very necessary to try our very hardest to be in a certain kind of balance or equilibrium, or to have a certain kind of self-discipline over us, because otherwise we can really, really make wrong choice. Gemini, the sign of choices. We can make wrong choices, decide to follow the wrong communication, the wrong information, the wrong advice, the wrong person. And because at the time of this full moon, if you look at my screen, Mercury at 24 degrees of almost 25 degrees of Sagittarius being in exile. So Mercury is not able to bring its higher qualities in the sign of Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is the opposite sign of the sign that Mercury rules, so Gemini. It is considered the furthest away from its own home. So this is why it's not able to bring out its higher qualities. But this isn't the problem in itself. The problem is that it holds a conversation of tension, a square, with Neptune also at 24 degrees. So the square is exact, very, very strong and powerful. And Mercury is the ruling planet of the full moon. And Neptune drowns Mercury. Whenever Mercury and Neptune speak in tension, Neptune is a stronger planet. So you can imagine that it will fill Mercury with a fog of confusion, with mists of, not being sure what we can believe. And we are not even sure what our mind tells us, our perceptions tell us. So there is a strong energy of doubt. There is a strong energy of confusion. But at the same time, this isn't the classic confusion, because there's also the energy Mars squaring Saturn, and the Mars and Saturn square is the strongest. The Sun and Moon and Saturn square are not as strong. And Mars, so this Mars in Sagittarius, the sign of the truth, the sign of philosophy, the sign of higher knowledge, the sign of, academic research, basically, university, academy, humanities, collective knowledge shared. That's also Sagittarius. Mars will fight for the truth, because Saturn is the principle of limitation in the sign of Pisces, which means even our intuition is so and so, because the conversation of tension. And also the ancients regarded both of these planets, both Mars and Saturn, as the two malefics. So this energy is not very, very easy, determining us to find clarity, to find our truth, to find something we can trust, to find something that is solid, Saturn, solidity. Yet the energy may not be permissive because it's too chaotic. It's very, very quick. It's very, very changing. It's very, very unstable. And exactly mentally, communication-wise, information-wise. Let me just give you like a very simple example. In our own personal lives, this is where we might have a project. We might have I don't know, some kind of deadline, some kind of a term, some kind of any kind of purpose that we want to push forward, like an investment or project or something with work or a travel or, absolutely anything. It really, really doesn't matter. And we are trying to make progress with it. Why? Because generally speaking, this is a moment of greater progress. This is where Pluto is in these very, very last degrees of Capricorn for the last time in a significant way in our lifetimes. So with certain larger things in our lives individually, we do need to progress. We do need to work on it. We do need to be present. But sometimes working on it means exactly knowing when to take it easy or when to take a step back. And this is the challenge here, because sometimes we know that we need to be present. We know that this project or whatever purpose we're working on is so, so, so important to move forward. And yet when the obstacles, the blockages, exactly the confusion comes, we all need to have the wisdom and the maturity to know that for the sake of the larger progress in the present, even if it feels uncomfortable, even if it's irritating, frustrating, angering, or whatever, we need to take a step back and wait for a better moment when we are much more clear. You know what I mean? So back to my example, if you need, like, for example, court papers, it's blocked. Something just blocks it. You had an appointment with a professional. The appointment's canceled. It's on a later date, which is much more inconvenient to you. So this period, not the larger, sorry, actually the shorter period, the beginning of the week will feel like a Mercury retrograde season. It will feel like everything is getting complicated. Everything is getting dual, Gemini, Pisces. Everything has a different side to it. There is not like a straightforward, easy solution, because everything comes with pluses and minuses, and we have to think, we have to evaluate. And chances are, especially at the beginning of the week, we need to take a step back for us to actually make sense of it. What he said, what she said, what the professional said, what the judge said, what the boss said, what the collaborator, this is where we're going to be bombarded with communication, and we won't know exactly what to trust. But the good side of this energy is that this isn't the classic case when we're lost on all levels. Like, let me give you an example. Back in 2021 or 2020, when we had Jupiter, Neptune squares and stuff, when we were totally lost. This is where we will just have a moment when it's so reality, let's say everyday life, the moment is so complicated, so complex, that we cannot help it but be a bit confused. So this isn't where we don't know our truth. This isn't where we don't know the big picture, what we do know. We just don't know how to react. We won't know what to do exactly. We won't know what the right thing to do in the present moment. That's where we will have confusion. Now, the collective situation is so very obvious. Saturn squaring Sun, Mars, and then Moon and Gemini, so a T square, limiting free speech, limiting communication, limiting the internet, strong political battles between what is just and what is not just, or as we move further towards the end of the week, especially then is when this theme of what is righteous and what is not righteous is going to be emphasized and highlighted, because Venus will make key moves and also Jupiter will connect to other planets. But I'll speak about this a little bit later on. But still, at the beginning of the week, we won't know what is true, what is not true regarding the collective situation. This is where, like this Gemini full moon, rather than to try and figure out the truth within the mixture of truth, lies, deception, and manipulation, we just rather block it out. We just rather do not believe absolutely anything. So this will be the collective reaction. But, the important people, the important actors on this world stage, well, they're going to be having big political, ideological, and philosophical battles as well. This with Sagittarius energy actually gets to the core principle of what they base their truth on. So it's really gonna play out in courts of justice, as in what is, let me give you an example, human rights. What is international agreement? Because if there is an international agreement, what happens if the players here do not respect it? How is that an agreement? How can you hold an international force accountable for promises it didn't respect or deliver? So this is the most complicated part of this energy, collectively speaking. But again, whatever happens collectively is also going to be very important for the evolution of the legislation and law and the power and the strength of the law in totality. You know what I mean? So collectively speaking, I won't even focus on the interpretation, because this will be such an intense moment that all of us just need to be aware, because we won't be able to make sense of what happens immediately in the present. We just need to open our awareness and be witness to what is playing out. But I repeat, only ideologically, in principle, in philosophy, because that's where the big battles are going to be. Sorry, I dropped my microphone again. So that's where the big battles are going to be playing out this week. Everything is going to be very strongly diplomatic in nature, if that even makes sense. But if you want to know more about this full moon in the sign of Gemini, I have a separate video dedicated for it. So just check it out. I'm going to link to it in the description below. So that is exactly how we're going to start the week, with the energy of tumultuous communication, challenging communication, potential conflict, potential, dual or actually even contradictory information where we just won't know what to trust. And exactly as I said, the guidance with this is allow this energy to unfold by stepping back and just being an observer until we can make some sense, or until we can think at least things through from not a heated perspective. And then whatever we choose to, how we react or what we do, is going to be much more balanced and grounded and much more authentic to us personally. And on the other hand, I cannot omit this. Mercury squaring Neptune in this way, it can represent moments of turmoil, moments of, hopelessness, moments of despair, moments of fear, moments when, the mind gets really, really dark and it scares us, especially people who know that they go through quite intensely in mental breakdowns, or they have a really poor mental health, or they are struggling with certain kind of traumas or inner melancholy. When things get darker in an astrological perspective, you are not alone. Because the positive side of this energy is that there is always someone to help. There is always someone who can make a difference. So that Mars and Sun conjunction can also be seen as courage. Courage to reach out, courage to speak what's on your heart, what's on your mind, what's on your soul. Sometimes speaking about it, expressing yourself makes the load that much easier. So I really, really encourage everyone who is going to go through a really, really hard time to try and reach out and get some help. Maybe it won't matter all that much what the helper says, but you being able to share your feelings and not feeling totally alone, having the specifics of Gemini, the interhuman connection, and the fact that, of course, symbolically, every other person is in a way a brother, a sibling to us, brother, sister, sibling, or in this symbolic way, that side of the energy is really, really going to matter quite a lot. So if you're going through a really tough time, know that someone out there in the world can be like a sibling to you, because all of us are connected. And if we ignore for a moment Saturn and Neptune's aspects, just the fact that they're together in the sign of Pisces, it really, really emphasizes that side of Pisces, which is all about the spirit of communion, the human interconnectedness, that in heart and spirit, we're just truly one. We function like one singular organism. So in this way, there is always hope out there. And I do believe this is the healthier side of hope. And now to move on a little bit. And in my notes, I highlighted the 30th because, yes, absolutely, on the 30th, Venus is going to make one big move, because we must remember that Venus is in the sign of Libra, her home sign, where she is very, very potent. And we could see this play out on the world stage in such a noticeable manner as soon as Venus got more and more powerful. The peace agreement, the ceasefire basically agreement, and things started to take a much more compassionate and diplomatic turn. But at the same time, we also saw Libra is dual in its way, but we also saw the opposite of this energy play out. For example, in the Netherlands, if I'm not mistaken, the potential new prime minister, or I'm not well informed. I don't know if he was elected or just candidate, but he expressed very clearly that everyone who doesn't respect the laws of the Netherlands, and this is where it's not the divine law, not religious law, but this is the earthly law, the secular law of Netherlands, has no place in that land, as in everyone who thinks that religious law is superior to secular law is invited to leave to another country, another place in the world where that is so. So we can see, and the reason you might think that how not very nice, how judgmental, how this and that, but at the same time, this is a valid reflection of exactly the energy that I'm going to speak about now. Venus conjunct the South Node. South Node in the sign of Libra, the collective karma, the past. And Libra is relationship. Libra is diplomacy. Libra is the rule of law. And so South Node, the past that we need to release. And when Venus, the ruler, meets the South Node in her home sign, well, it's very, very clear that there is going to be a big highlight on the legal field, let's say. And that prime minister's speech was so reflective of this. You know, it evoked the law, South Node in the sign of Libra, but then the new reality, Venus. If you don't like my laws, please leave. So releasing. And if this is going to be like legally binding, you can imagine what grave effects this will have on the lives of so many, many people. And I'm just not even judging it from a polarized way. From our perspective, it doesn't matter how we feel about this. If this is incorrect or correct, or if we support it or not, but it is one way how collectively speaking, this Venus and South Node conjunction played out in a very, very obvious way, because something was released. This Venus also opposes the North Node in the sign of Aries, along with planetoid Aries, so the sister of Mars, goddess of rebellion, goddess of discord. So you can imagine Aries' symbolism with the North Node in Aries plays out as the truth of the people. You know, if the collective, if the majority within a land feel a certain way about law and justice, then no one else from the exterior can come and tell them otherwise. The power of the people. And that is also very, very clear how it played out in the example that I have given. But this isn't just about the Netherlands. This is about basically everywhere, but every single country or land or, you know, geographic location has its own karma, has its own distinctiveness. So in each place, this plays out in its own unique, specific way and pattern. All we need to do is just to observe how it, but needless to say, collective energy is one thing, but this will also play out in our own individual lives. How will we release the past within our relationships? For some people, this may mean the end or termination of one kind of relationship in their lives, maybe romantic, contractual, neighborly, friendship, or whatever. But for other people, this is where it's not necessarily a relationship that is terminating in their lives, but their own worldview, or how you say this, their own perspective, their own mindset about all of this, their own patterns, their own, how should I say, customs, their own inner structure, basically, on how they built and were in relationships. Maybe that is changing. Because not so long ago, a few days ago, Venus was standing across the sky from Chiron, and that Chiron kind of highlighted all of the bad patterns that we have while forming relationships. You know, for example, do we need relationship because we actually want to live a partnership, or because of the need of codependency or low self-worth, or or we're using the partner for this, that, and that? And this is where I'm not just talking about romantic partnerships, but any kind of partnerships, even like a job, for example. That's like a relationship because it's you and the company with a contract. How do you feel about it? What is the basis of the relationship? just codependency, like where you get the money and they get the work? Or is there some kind of passion? Is there something else there? This is just an example. So this energy will really, really, really make us think of what are we basing relationships, agreements, contracts, any one-on-one alliance on. And if there's anything that does not serve us from the past, again, I repeat, like a pattern, like a custom, like a belief, like a worldview, like, let's say, an advice or a teaching someone else gave us a long time ago. It might have been very valid then, but the person who we are right now is already changed, transformed, different. So this is where we really, really, really are going to make a certain kind of order, a purge or cleaning within our mind's Mercury in the sign of Sagittarius, especially when it squares Neptune, but also this Venus in Libra conjunct the South Node. So this will be a powerful elimination. And this can give, so even though this aspect may have a lot of, not so easy, not so cheerful, sides to it, because we may have to say goodbye to people, or we might have to do certain things in a very, very unnatural way for us. And when I say unnatural, but because we are still doing things as we used to do it in the past, whenever we want to do something a different way, or whenever we are actually executing a new truth, a new belief, a new mental pattern, it feels at first rather uncomfortable and unnatural. So this is the way I mean unnatural. So all of us are gonna have to do this one way or another in our individual lives. But the positive side to this is that the new is gonna feel so much better, and it's gonna get us a long way quickly and easily, and it will resonate so very much to the person who we grow into being. So this will represent strong impulses to make changes within our relationships, our contractual relationships, any kind of one-on-one alliance, or of course, in that area of life where this Venus and South Node in the sign of Libra at around 24 degrees falls into your own personal chart. And of course, we cannot forget I'm just going to show her. Planetoid Aries with the North Node also opposing Venus. Again, Aries is very, very feisty. She is very, very intense, and she basically takes no compromise in order to show everyone the truth, the Uranian kind of truth, because in this sense, Aries is very, very similar to Uranus because she takes no prisoners. So that expression of hers is, how should I say, alchemically and energetically speaking, is very tough for Venus. Even if Venus is in her home sign, very, very powerful, yet still this opposition has a toughness to it, has an intensity to it. May it be emotional, mental, or legal, or in any area of life it may play out as. And also, when Venus is going to be in this position, this 24 degree of Libra, well, she will hold a quincunx with Neptune. So it's not just the opposition, but it's also a quincunx to Neptune. Now, this quincunx with Neptune is also very, very important, but it's much better if we look at this from a more philosophical and spiritual perspective, because Neptune in the sign of Pisces ultimately represents compassion. It represents the Christ consciousness. It represents the spirit of communion. It represents empathy, deep love. but in an extreme way, almost in a blind way, where we don't judge, we just give into the principle, the divine principle ultimately. Now, Venus in the sign of Libra is also about the same thing, but it's air sign, so it has to have a discernment. It has to have a process of judging. And I don't say this judging in a bad way where we judge a person, but we analyze it, either with actually not either, both with mind, with heart, and with any other part of our inner being, like psyche, spirit, it doesn't matter. But we do need to have a process of judgment here. So this is what this aspect can play out as. Neptune wants the greater good, Venus wants the greater good, but they have to find the right methodology. Like, for example, blind compassion can lead to dark situations so very, very easily. You know what I mean? Like, let me give you an example. Giving to a person in need is without a doubt the Christ consciousness, compassion, empathy, and it really, really creates good karma. The universe is not going to be indifferent. Yet, feeding, continuous supporting someone who takes grave advantage of their own bad situation to use others, to receive sympathy, to receive help, and not to work, not to struggle, not to... Us supporting that is ultimately the road to hell. You know what I mean? So this is what is compassion? What is healthy compassion? And we might have situations where we won't know the answer to this very clearly. So all we can do is follow our hearts. This going on the world stage, we kind of know how this will play out. The confusion, the scales of justice. But what happens when the scale is like this, oscillating all the time? We won't know, and not even the international community won't know what is healthy compassion, what is solidarity, and what is not. This is going to be debated strongly. Fortunately, at that time, Mercury, again, planet of communication and mind, has already advanced into the end degrees of Sagittarius. So even if the square with Neptune is still there a little bit, it is no longer very influential, but Mercury is in shadow. So Mercury will retrograde back to this position. So whatever happens in our lives, especially in courts of justice, legally, when I say legally, is any kind of paper that needs to go through an authority or approval, or even within like a company, when a communication is official and it has to go through stages. All of that, whatever happens this week, there might be a reverberation back in December, later on in December, and also at the beginning of next year. So whatever happens, again, is not perhaps the final. And that can be both positive and not so favorable, but we really, really need to, as I said earlier, take a step back and try to look at things from a much more stark and down-to-earth perspective. Now, also at the same time, the sun in the sign of Sagittarius holds a quincunx with Jupiter. This quincunx is important because Jupiter is the ruling planet of Sagittarius. Jupiter has everything to do about the law and legislation and our truth as well. So this conversation, this hard aspect of quincunx, which links together two signs, two areas of life, two energies that don't have strong connections with one another, this will really, really challenge us to make sense of things that are happening. This quincunx, just like the Venus quincunx, is gonna have us soul search of what justice, what truth, what blessing, what physical beauty, what physical well-being, what physical prosperity, everything that has to do with Taurus actually means for us. And how do we get there? Mars, of course, Mars and the Sun in the sign of Sagittarius. Sagittarius, the hope. Sagittarius, the dream. Sagittarius is the higher thinking, the positive, the optimistic thinking. The Sun and Mars in Sagittarius definitely want to get there, definitely want to live the dream, definitely want to embody the principle, but embodiment actually is Taurus, and Jupiter comes with a certain set of truth. What basically what blocks us from being able to embody our higher principles? And this is also Mars squaring Saturn. That's also how this energy is going to play out. So it's not a very, very easy energy, even in the middle of the week. So we still need to have taken a step back and trying our hardest to look and decide and choose and react to things from a much calmer and balanced place. And of course, planetoid Ceres. Here she is, also holds the square with Saturn. Ceres also very freshly entered into the sign of Sagittarius. Ceres in Sagittarius, on one hand, it can represent the right for nurture, food, the basic needs, stuff like that, but much more legally speaking, Sagittarius, like human rights, stuff like that. And there might be aggression with this. Some people being discriminated from their basic needs like food and water and stuff like that, Ceres. But this can also have a much more spiritual and philosophical take on it, where Ceres in Sagittarius is what actually gives us hope, what gives us optimism, what gives us the inner fire, Sagittarius, fire sign, to, live in a much more elevated way, to embrace the higher octaves of our own philosophical path in life. So Ceres squaring Saturn, we might feel a little bit uninspired, unmotivated. Something might cut off temporarily, of course, the source of our inspiration, whatever feeds our higher thinking, for example. But Mercury is also important, maybe not necessarily on the 30th, but yeah, on the 29th, because on the 29th, Mercury is actually conjunct the galactic center. The galactic center is that supermassive black hole at the center of our galaxy, holding everything together. So that can represent a really, really powerful cosmic download, a cosmic inspiration. The mind of the divine, the mind of God, speaking straight into our hearts and minds. But you can imagine we will need a little bit of time to make sense of that. So again, we may feel very anxious. We may feel like plugged into electricity, where everything just courses through our beings, but we cannot make sense of that hype. If you will have that hype either on the 29th or 30th, know that it's the galactic center working, being activated in your life. So moving on the 1st of December, on the 1st of December, Mercury, and this is going to be a really important energy shift, Mercury leaves the sign of Sagittarius and enters into the sign of Capricorn. Now, in the sign of Capricorn, which is considered basically the stage of manifestation, the top of the sky, where any planet gets into a spotlight, so to speak, because it has to take action. It has to do something concretely, physically. It has to give us some kind of power or position of power. So I really, really like this energy. Even if Mercury, please remember, is still in shadow. So it's setting the stage for Mercury retrograde this December. but in itself, Mercury in the sign of Capricorn is where it can be much more grounded. This is where it's the typical down-to-earth way of thinking and logic. The experience, the wisdom, the accumulated information and knowledge of professionals or ancestors or whatever is really, really gonna come to our help. And also with Mercury in the sign of Capricorn, we can make really, really good use of our knowledge, know-how, mastery, our skills, everything that makes us stand out professionally speaking. Because Capricorn ultimately is the sign of professionalism. So yes, this can be really, really good for business, for new elements regarding very earthly things in our lives entering into our awareness and us being able to use them and progress. But this is just where they come into our awareness. Keep in mind that everything may change or may suffer modifications as Mercury will start to move retrograde later on. Yet still, this is quite a positive energy, which is starting to give us solutions and which is starting to give us a lot of grounding, basically. Why? Because Mercury, as soon as it enters into the sign of Capricorn, it holds a sextile, a conversation of harmony with Saturn. Saturn rules Capricorn on one hand, so it's very, very important. And Saturn is the planet of structure. So this is a really, really, really favorable aspect when all the confusion which we experienced at the beginning of the week, we are making sense of that. We are processing it. We are actually using it constructively. We are building. We are making plans. Even if we don't have everything that we need in our plan, some things are obvious, other things we still need to brainstorm or be patient for them to come to us. But with the Capricornian expression, it will still feel empowering. It will feel like we do have a choice. It will feel like we are taking action for our greater good. May it be professionally speaking, with job, with career, communication agreement with superiors, Mercury sextile Saturn. Maybe it is actually our superiors who come with a certain kind of help, with who will come with suggestions, who will come with advice, etc., etc. So this is a really, really, really helpful and super practical aspect for everything, down to earth, concrete 3D, for us to make progress with it. Of course, on my screen, you can see a Mercury sextiling Saturn yet, because I need to make Mercury actually step into the sign of Capricorn, at least to be at 0 degrees. A little bit more. There we are. I think, yeah, Mercury is now at 0 degrees of Capricorn. So you can see the sextile between Mercury and Saturn play out. Now, another very important energy besides this, and this is not a very comfortable one, is that Venus at 26, but actually, let's move forward a day. Venus at 27 degrees of Libra now is squaring Pluto. Now, this isn't a very easy energy, because every time we have like a Pluto square between Venus, of course, it can feel like a certain kind of heartbreak. It can feel, again, like there is no way to get what we want in a peaceful way, let's say, or we need to make this and that strong compromise. There is no evading, or there is no a way how to bypass certain tough compromises. So, this is an aspect where really, really tough decisions and choices need to be made. And this is where it triggers Libra, because it will not be able to be non-confrontational. So this is where we have to confront with something, a truth, a situation, a choice, a decision, something that life asks us to make a decision. This can be, of course, with partnerships, where this aspect, if you are heading towards, let's say, a separation, a divorce, or anything like that, this will definitely be a very key moment there, where, there is no right or wrong choice. This is where you will need to contemplate, because you have to look at any relationship, not just romantic. You want to leave your job because you don't like it anymore. That is so very much in the specifics of this energy. So again, it doesn't really have to be romantic when I say relationship, but how do we analyze it? There is the heart. I don't love it. I'm bored. I'm frustrated. I don't want to be here anymore. But there is also Pluto, the money, and how does this relationship benefit me? What kind of structure, stability, strength, and power does it give to my life? And if the scales of justice or the scales of your own verdict weigh heavily towards Capricorn, well, you can imagine that Venus has to give way. Venus has to be confrontational in the sense that she has to express her dissatisfaction, but she also has to accept the truth that she needs the relationship. She cannot eliminate it. So what's her only option? Transformation. You know what I mean? So sometimes elimination, sometimes ending it suddenly, sometimes divorce, sometimes saying bye-bye is not really an option due to the specifics of life. Again, Pluto in Capricorn. But then we have to choose a certain kind of compromise by confronting it. This is a strong confrontational energy. At the same time, this can also create moments when there are certain very, very strong attractions playing out. But let me just give you the basic example. Not you, or let's say there's a married person and their marriage is quite harmonious, but there comes a fated moment when they get so attracted by someone else. You can imagine that situation will also birth confrontations, even if not directly. That person needs to confront with their own attraction versus their own faithfulness. You know what I mean? So moments like this can play out this week in our lives, but what is much more important than these individual expressions is that what will this do to the legislation? What will this do to big partnerships, in the sense that on the world stage? Because on the world stage, alliances and partnerships and stuff like that really, really matter. And we will see them transforming. But again, how, we might not really know precisely. But still, the good part of this energy is Mercury sextiling Saturn, because that will give us groundedness. That will give us a sense of stability, and that will make the common good be that very much obvious to us. You know what I mean? Because the road to hell is paved with good intentions only when we're not aware between the difference of good and bad. But this sextile makes us be aware if we choose to be aware. Now, moving on. Oh, I also on the second, I want to show you something, a minor aspect, but I find it fascinating. You can see in the sign of Virgo here, where Juno, asteroid of partnerships, again, this emphasizes so deeply partnerships, is conjunct dwarf planet Orcus. Again, Orcus is just very similar like Pluto, but it, how should I say, it re-educates, it reformats. Pluto exposes the corruption, the dark, the bad, everything, Plutonian, in order for it to be eliminated. Again, Pluto is the ruler of the sign of Scorpio. Scorpio cuts out the corruption, the infection. Orcus, on the other hand, of course, it reveals it, but it wants to heal it. It wants to re-educate it. It wants to purify it. This is the big difference between Orcus and Pluto. So again, this Juno conjunct Orcus says to me that we also want to fix, we also want to heal, we also want to do justice in a best sense possible, not in a vindictive sense, if we can with our relationships. And Virgo is the sign, which gives up on something that can still be saved the hardest. Virgo doesn't give up easily. Like, it has a flaw, whatever, let's throw it. No. Virgo, if it can save it, it will save it. So this is like another side of the partnership energy. And yeah, then we finally get to the very end of the week on the 3rd of December. And this is where the Venus and Pluto square become exact. Venus is at 28 degrees of Libra, while Pluto at 28 degrees of Capricorn, so a very tough square. And also, on the 3rd of December, we can also see that by this time, Mercury is advancing into Capricorn. So this is a really, really good energy because it will start its trine with Jupiter. And this trine between Mercury and Jupiter is going to be the highlight, the most positive element of this present Mercury retrograde season. When I say present, I don't mean the present moment, but the upcoming, because Mercury is still just in shadow and it's not even all that slow. So it's not time yet, but Mercury is going to hold next week, so not this week, next week, an absolutely beautiful trine with Jupiter. And that will be the saving grace, because that can represent really practical, concrete blessings. That can represent where justice actually does a good job. And when I say justice, not necessarily divine justice, but actually earthly justice. There are moments when actually earthly justice gets something right, and it feels like a blessing. It feels like a relief. It feels like the boulder came off the heart, so it feels like freedom. So that is an energy I'm really, really looking forward to, and not just when Mercury holds this conversation for the first time with Jupiter, but all the 3 moments during the retrograde when this conversation will be retaken by Mercury. So this is definitely the saving grace. But another way to look at this mercurial activity is that this is how we are refining our inner truth. This is a very, very, very strong alchemical aspect. How we turn dreams into reality. Neptune squaring Mercury is the dream, but that is where the dream has to make sense and it has to be real in a way. So that first stage of the dream is the how you say it, like an alchemical distillery, when everything which doesn't make sense is pure fantasy, or sources from something that really doesn't matter from us, that part disappears. We get disappointed, you know, but the core of the dream survives, and we get to see the truth of it and how we're going to make it real when Mercury trines Jupiter. So again, Jupiter and Neptune have some very strong similarities because they co-rule, both of them rule the sign of Pisces. Both of them are planets which have so much to do with the divine, with the dream, and with manifestation, of course. So even though the end of the week is going to have its own chaos, its own confusion, there's still a very strong saving grace in the air, and this is definitely the saving grace. So thank you so much for listening. I really hope that all this information is helpful and useful to you in a certain way. And again, please remember, especially at the beginning of the week with the Gemini full moon, it doesn't matter who and what and from how many directions you're being triggered with information, with communication, with angry words, for example, or with your friends and social circle just suffocating you, exasperating you with communication and information. Take a step back and allow things to sink in, and for you to be able to process life and communication and decisions and choices from a cooler place, you know, not heated by the fire of Sun and Mars together in the sky. So we really, really need to embody our wisest self and step back before we react and think it through very deeply and thoroughly how we want to react. Because if our reaction is not us, you know, if our reaction is just the inner animal, then chances are we need to stop ourselves. And at the same time, for everyone who is going through a difficult period from a mental health and psychological perspective, know that there is always help out there. So thank you, everyone. If you like this horoscope, please like and share, or you can support me on the PayPal link in the description below. With this being said, wishing everyone a magical full moon. Until next time, bye for now.